a sad woman he hasn't made love to in 5 years. She will get up to make his breakfast, as she does every morning, and allow herself one peppery sigh over a cup of black coffee after he leaves. It's a hard life out here, Robert. The lake is frozen solid, but more than one wife is drowned in it. The locals say sometimes at night you can see brilliant flares hovering over the surface, and there's a rare song spliced through the wind that spooks the dogs. Stay a while, beloved poet, or visit us again when our quaint Vermont woods have ceased to beguile you. You'll find many poems buried here in the country dawn. William Shakespeare. You got that right. You have written the most remembered anti-Semitic play of all time, but not even you could have foreseen the consequences of the stage you helped set. Here are the players, familiar to you even during your time. Politicians determining the fate of a people who are receptive to the dangerous fusion when power controls the rights of its cultural thespians. These days and nights, I consult tweets on the procedural stages in which public opinion ossifies. And human beings, real and afraid, shift nervously in their assigned seating. Some walk out, and some stay to listen to protest the scripts as bad actors, chameleon-like, crossfire and obfuscate, so the sun only sets on their prescriptive deletion. I have to ask at this point if art is worth the trouble, if your famous authorized plays and poetry were meant to exist in a state of weaponry. William, you are not above the law. But the law as you knew it and as I know it was never intended to be just, which leads me to hold art in a court of underground contempt. All the world's a stage, you said, but you declined to look at what you were capable of. Here we are anyway, watching the familiar agents, learning their destined lines. Blue flame of July. Can't fix what's beyond repair. Baby, I know the feeling. A broke clock is right twice a day. Don't mean I'm gonna be healing. Any fool can make the rules. Any fool will follow them. I know in my soul that's right. Blue flame of July got me good. I can't stop the lies. Break me down before I become the same old fool I used to be. Can't fix what's beyond repair. Baby, I know the feeling. A broke clock is right twice a day. Don't mean I'm gonna be dealing. If a group of fools makes the rules, all the fools will follow them. Why can't we make better rules? Watch the biggest fools swallow them. I know in my soul that's righteous. Blue flame of July got us good. We've got to keep it moving. Break us down before we become even bigger fools than we used to be. "100-Year Flood." A barn owl teases the bright dark, and you are unmanageable. The people of the area have a standby way to talk about it, a right to ferment content that's forever pushing guidelines on how to guillotine the poor. Buildings unhinged and running, mud tickling through synaptic bricks. Not sure what we can say except to repeat the obvious, and some aren't ungrateful for an interruption. Disaster brings lemon pepper frogs and antsy canines. Plenty of puffy men, eager to drape their heroes' posed tendons. I feel satiated by their confidence, or at least its familiar performance. An elderly woman told a volunteer fireman she was too old to care. What happens when you struggle for generations and a storm ejects what you're still struggling for? In the end, infrastructure owned her. Shelter remained temporary, yet seductive. She refused to patch her excitement while she reported on the damage. Decades of keeping house, children, and working shit jobs unsettled her more than a flood ever could. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Could you speak to us for a minute or two about what sustains you in your work? What icons are on your desk? What things do your eyes rest upon, or your ears, get soothed by as you're doing your work?
Well, currently on my desk are 4 piles of books, which is my to-read pile. But crystals, I like incense. I like to light candles while I'm reading, listen to music, especially blues and jazz. My notebook too that I'm always writing in where I take notes. I usually have that nearby too.
All righty. Well, thanks so much. We'll hear the second round in a little while, all right?
All right, sounds good.
All righty. So our next poet is Gail Davern. Gail was born in London and immigrated to the US at 12 years of age. She teaches English composition and literature at Skagit Valley College and lives on Whidbey Island on the Washington coast. Her book, From the Island at the End of Winter, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2018. In the title poem of the book, I imagine Gail as both swimmers. Someone passes, another one remains. Not sure who will move forward, in what form consciousness will emerge in a new season. Someone sinking, passing, forgotten. Someone survives and thrives through the cold and into the sun. These poems are lush and sharp, often at the same time. They are remembrances and reveries of family, wild with love and grief, and with plenty of sweet acceptance. Welcome, Gail Davern.
Thank you, Georgia. Can you all hear me properly?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to read with this amazing group of poets. I'm honored. I'd also like, before I start reading, I'd like to thank my daughter, Fritha, for allowing me to use her painting as the cover of the book. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just a beautiful painting and the colors mesh so well with the title. I'm going to read some of the poems from the book, and then I'll read some new poems later on. But I'd like to start by reading the first poem in the book. I wrote it after viewing a photograph of an execution in Time magazine. It was taken during the Civil War in El Salvador by a photojournalist, and it was before we had digital cameras or iPhones. If some of you remember, the Civil War in El Salvador lasted for about 12 years, from 1979, I believe, to 1992, and included the deliberate terrorizing and targeting of civilians by US-trained government death squads. So this poem is, surprisingly enough, entitled Finding a Photograph of an Execution in Time magazine. Here in the jungle, after a rainfall, the colors so vivid from trees and birds that this little grove where the army has chosen to stop is illuminated. A photographer hiding zeroes in from 200 feet on the one small prisoner digging a hole with brown hands in brown pants and brown shirt. When he's finished, he lies down and crosses his arms. Climbing in on top of him, the chosen soldier plunges a knife into the prisoner's throat. A gunshot would bring the enemy. After the first cut, another is inflicted into the jugular, then the abdomen. With blood gushing into his coarse black hair, the earth is kicked over him, and the jungle is put straight before the next rain washes away the sins of the trespassers, and before the film is put in the mail to New York. The photo appears in Time magazine as a write-up on execution. The prisoner's right leg rose a little off the ground. When children become teenagers, parent-child relationships begin to change. So this poem is when I discovered my eldest daughter, Jenny, didn't quite value me as I expected she would. It's called, if you have teenagers, you'll understand, I think. It's called After All. At 16, my daughter charts my failures, identifying with none. Her life to be a complete change. Her future filled with desires I can't gratify. Threatened, she believes the lies she placates me with. When small, her acceptance of me was a gift, a direction for us both. I held her warm against my body, allowed her to nuzzle into me during sleep, even though she pushed deep into my abdomen, unaware of the hurt she caused. Now I'm not sure if she's there when I see her. Attached to headphones with different hair colors, she aims to straighten out the curls I was proud of. We share the same bathroom mirror, aware of our differences. Our age, only 20 years apart, but for her, an eternity. I'm sure I look old, for she chastises me for wrinkles, for sag, for the time I don't devote to her. I look at her, so full with expectations, and can't believe we are apart, and all of this a disappointment. This next poem is my immigration poem. My mother and I came to America, as Georgia said, when I was a teenager, and my mother refused to fly. So we took one of the last final sailings of the Queen Mary. Its opulence amazed me and showed me a world I could not have imagined as a child growing up in the Sussex countryside. It was just amazing. And I didn't know much about America. It was kind of an adventure for me. I knew what I had learned from Lassie, and I knew what I had learned from movies. And I did know there was a statue of a woman holding a torch in New York Harbor. And so when we did come into New York Harbor, I was excited to see that. But unfortunately, it was a foggy, gray day, and it seemed like it was in a dream. We stayed one night in New York, and then we took a train across America to our final destination. Oh, and by the way, it was in January, so it snowed on board the ship. It's called Taking the Queen Mary to America. Its long bowed sides moved motionless through the water toward New York. Snow glazed the deck's scouted boards, and the portholes froze with ice. Tony, the Italian waiter, perspired over tables and spoke of delicacies like persimmons and trout. At night, the dining room became a dance floor, and the band warmed the couples with music. It was January, and I was a teenager, not realizing the great extravagance of travel, knowing only that in sailing to America, I was leaving behind my only life. In mid-Atlantic, the gulls dived for fish that were turned over in the swell, and the squalls that caught us unexpectedly nestled us inside the land of the ship. Beneath us lay the ocean, thick and alone, except when covered by the huge bodies of boats filled with people untouched by water, writing postcards of their voyage. The harbor was attended only by that gray mistress and tiny tugboats drawing us up the mouth to land in the isolation of a gray warehouse called Customs, where strangers pawed and pulled our belongings. When questioned, we could remember nothing to declare except our visas and the memory we held of sea and a journey that hadn't finished because we were going west into America. So when my children were young, there was always that horrifying moment in the grocery store when they learned that those shrink wrap pieces of meat belonged to moo cows or piggy wigs. I decided to take that a bit farther and write a surreal prose poem about it. And it's called Meats. Pushing the shopping cart past Meats, I was brought to a stop by the appearance of my best friend, shrink wrapped, out straight, right next to a smoked Cornish game hen and a peppered steak. She must have been dead for days, but I had just seen her in my dream last night. Disgusting, said my teenage daughter. What an end. She was the one friend of yours I liked. I was dumb. I just couldn't get over the canny reality of my dream. In it, she was trying to flag down a big truck. I see now it must have been a truck full of animals for market. I kept trying to pull her into the house, but nothing would stop her. She had her heart set on hitchhiking to Vegas. She wanted to be a blackjack dealer. I'd watched her practicing for months. My daughter brought me back to reality by pointing out that some shoppers might be offended if I stood there and stared much longer. Thank God she still had a dress on, I thought. It was the dress I'd helped her choose, yellow with big orange flowers. I felt it gave her complexion a boost. It did little now, although it made a nice setting. "Ya wanna buy or ya just looking?" asked a burly man who must be the butcher. A blood-stained white apron surrounded his enormous body. Now there's a piece of meat, I thought. Why would anyone waste their time or appetite on Gloria? She could hardly weigh more than 110 pounds and all white meat. My daughter finally got me to move along to the eggs, milk, and yogurt section, but I couldn't concentrate. All of a sudden, food took on a new meaning. I glanced back to meats, and to my horror, there was my English professor, eyeing Gloria. He was squishing her in a lot of places, and then, my God, smelling her. He seemed to be put off by the smell, for he put her back, unaware of my concern. "Mother, you can't camp out here as Gloria's bodyguard. We've got to finish shopping." I couldn't bring myself to explain to her how I felt. Gloria was my best friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. That was tremendous. So my question for you is, when you had your book published, it was came out of the sabbatical that you took when you went back to England. And so I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your sabbatical and how you set that up to meet your needs, and how important going home can be.
Okay, interesting, Georgia. This could take a while.
A couple minutes, you can edit yourself. I know you can.
So I was awarded a sabbatical by Skagit Valley College for fall of 2016 in order to go to a writer's retreat, Istanbul, in Nikki, which is on the west coast of Wales, down from Aberystwyth, if you know the coast. I was going there to work with the Welsh poet Samantha Wynne Raddock. I will be forever grateful to Samantha and her patience with me, and to the help she gave me, and to the college, because for the first time in my 26-year teaching career, I was given the space and time to just luxuriate in poetry. It was a real gift. I worked with Samantha in the morning and walked in the afternoon. And I want to tell you, through my sabbatical, I did a lot of walking. You know, the UK has 176,000 miles of footpaths, and those footpaths go through farmers' fields, barnyards, lanes, woods, and it was so inspirational just to walk in these natural places. I chose Wales because my father was Welsh, And I had discovered the year before I had a whole Welsh family I never knew about. And so we got to meet up, we got to show pictures, share stories, and get to know each other. And then, as you pointed out, I went home. I went home to my hometown, Rye, in East Sussex. If any of you've been there, it's on the southeast coast of England, and visited with my family there. Going home is always a gift. And I would sit in the tea room and write, and luckily nothing changes much in Rye. It's not like here. And I would go to my old haunts, like walking under the cliff and up to Rye Hill to my grandparents' graves. I finally ended up going back to London, and I went there to plays and museums like the National Gallery, the Tate and Tate Modern. They're all free in London. My favorite place, if you ever go to London, is Kew Gardens. And I still have to write a poem set there because I'm just dying to do that. These places are like rich, comforting chocolate. And each bite, you savor each bite and it inspires you. So looking at those beautiful sights, walking along those inspiring vistas, viewing famous paintings always encourages creative thought. And so out of all of that experience came that small book, a remembrance of that magical time. And I'll always have that. And I can never go back to that time.
Thank you so much, Gail.
I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. It was lovely. All right. Well, we'll move on now to our next poet. And our next poet is Jessica Gigot. And Jessica Gigot's first book of poems, Flood Patterns, was published by Antrim House in 2015. Feeding Hour was recently published by Trail to Table Press. Jessica lives on a farm, Harmony Fields, in rural Skagit County with her husband, 2 young daughters, and currently over 85 lambs. Rightfully called a shepherdess, she guards and coaxes sheep, her daughters, the land, to flourish into their fullest selves. You could include the titles teacher, scientist, writer, cheesemaker, and dovetails lead songstress in her talents. That was her singing in our montage at the beginning. In these poems, in Feeding Hour, we learn of her well-earned truths, as in what we care for comes back to us in hard and mysterious ways. Welcome, Jessica Gigot.
Thank you, Georgia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, Nikki and Gail, for your amazing poems. I kind of want to just listen to you guys, but I'll read a few poems from Feeding Pattern, or Feeding Hour. This is the cover here, and I just want to acknowledge Margaret Davidson is a local Skagit artist, and she let me use her beautiful drawing as a cover. And I do have quite a few sheep poems in here. Don't worry, I won't be reading all of them, but this book does speak a bit to my experience with shepherding, as well as learning how to be a mother. So this first poem is called Year of the Sheep. I've watched their tender pink udders swell over the past weeks. Now they are swollen to the point of pain. The lamb drops and is nocturnally nurtured to stand, licked clean of all slime and blood. I have never been so proud to be female. I have never been so aware of time and place. Ruminants living side by side, grazing day after day. They carry on as if I am not here, or as if I am not trying to be here. We started with 5 and now have a flock hardy enough to stand the dank northwest soil, smart enough to avoid the sharp barb of bramble alongside the field. According to Chinese astrology, people born in the year of the sheep have special sensitivity to art and beauty and a fondness for quiet living. I am carrying my child in my arms. We are both sheep. pointing out the berries and dandelion fluff. She sees the flock amble, single file, back to the barn. Ba, she says. Yes, ba, I say. We both see together. We both smile and wave. I remember when I wanted to be anyone but myself, when I thought that I had everything to prove. Now my routines are like veins inside my own white pulsing body. Feed, clean, care, observe. The work is simple, nurture. Give attention to someone or something that is growing, something outside of yourself. Let your little flock teach you all you need to know about love. Georgia referenced a line from a poem I had written about one of our first sheep named Ruth, and I wanted to read this poem called The Story of Ruth. And I should add, if anyone can't hear me, just let me know. The Story of Ruth. I drove this bottle baby home in my hatchback, bleeding the whole way. Her speckled face stood out in the sea of only white and only brown. Every morning in the barn, while the others were frantic for food, she'd curl around my side. Bottom of the barn hierarchy, I'd sneak her hay squares behind the gate to make sure she was getting enough. When I noticed the pox on her teats, I knew she couldn't stay here for much longer, for fear of infecting them all. On this cold winter night, I pray over my kale, bean, and sausage soup, remembering that life spawns more life, and what we care for comes back to us in hard and mysterious ways. So I do have one tulip poem. Tulip season in the Skagit Valley is gorgeous, and it does a lot for our local economy. It also brings a lot of tourism and traffic, so there's a lot of mixed feelings about tulip season. But I wrote this poem, and actually former poet laureate Todd Marshall, this was included in a wonderful digital chapbook that he put together, collecting poems from across the state. It's called Tulip Season, Skagit Valley. April is the time of year when cars flood the fields. Lookers, cameras, selfie sticks huddle under neon umbrellas. The buried bulbs have waited patiently for their brief moment of pomp and blossom. In a few weeks, each petal will fall into history, making no noise of their passing. The green stems will be slashed, bulbs eventually dug and sold. The watchers dissipate, unaware that in the next field, their next meal is being born. Since we have a big full pink moon tomorrow, this is a poem I wrote called Pink Moon. Waiting for the pink moon to rise. Lamentable clouds hang low on the foothills where snow lines still linger. The call of blushing quince catches my eye. It's the egg or sprouting grass moon, yet spring is delayed. I shiver in the evening air and notice that my buoyant snap pea leaves have been stripped to stem. Discouraged, I turn homeward, seeing the first spring moon and summer's harvest only in my expectant mind. And I guess in the pandemic, I've been doing a lot of cooking. My grandma was a wonderful cook, and this is a poem I wrote about her. I inherited her old metal recipe box, and I feel quite a bit of responsibility with, with this recipe box. It's lovely, floats from your kitchen as you turn fat and grain and leaf into dinner. I sit in the next room and flip through index cards in the long tin box. A life story told by ingredients, sauce stains and tattered edges. The box came back to me 6 years later. Sage meatloaf, tangy cheese spread, good rhubarb crumble, California pot roast. You always served more than enough, applauded the empty plate. Here in the shallow light of my kitchen, I flip the cards again like they are tarot, predicting my future. How does this mother find the time? Your voice says frankly, never skip a step or an ingredient, and clean, dear one, as you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. That was terrific. So I have a question for you. And I'm wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about your background in sciences and how that ends up in your poems, how it reflects in your poems, you know, whether we see the elements and compounds and structure, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wrote poetry when I was really young, and then I really got into science, and so I ended up taking that path and coming back to poetry later in life. And I think there's a lot of overlap, especially in science writing. There's sort of a precision in science writing that I think is very similar to poetry. I did get in trouble a lot as a young biologist because I tried to have very creative titles that were always like had a big red slash mark through the title of like, no, be specific, you know. So I'm glad that I've sort of moved into poetry because I think it's a better way for me to describe and interact with the natural world. I also really respect science and what scientists do, but there's a wholeness that comes with describing the natural world through poetry that I really appreciate.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, well, we'll go to our next poet, Rena Priest.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here.
Wait, I have to introduce you. Okay. I have to say lovely things. Okay, Rena Priest is a Lummi tribal member living her birthright on Coast Salish land in the Pacific Northwest. She was just announced as our new Washington State Poet Laureate for 2021 through 2023. Her debut book, Patriarchy Blues, was published by Moonpath Press and won a National Book Award in 2018. Floating Bridge Press honored Sublime Subliminal as a finalist in their 2018 chapbook competition. Each of the poems, particularly in Sublime Subliminal, just fulfill this kind of dedication that I see to the beauty of language, foreign language and English. It brings unusual, marginalized historical figures into these kind of postmodern times, and the lines just snap with heat. And I say, this poet is cheeky. Welcome, Rena.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction. I'd like to begin with acknowledging that the Washington State Poet Laureate program is co-sponsored by the the Washington State Arts Commission and Humanities Washington. And so I just want to take a moment now to thank them for the work that they do in bringing this program to the public, and also thank the organizers of this event. I'm so just really delighted to be here. And I'll start with truth. We'll get the truth out of the way, and then in my second reading, we'll have beauty and some kind of flowers, maybe not tulips, but I think there might be some daffodils and some lilies in there. So. This first poem is called Silence from the Deep, and it was written in response to Jordan Amani Keith's call. She's the Seattle Civic Poet right now, and she put out a call for poems about whales as they relate to struggles that women face in urban environments. And I thought that was a really compelling call. And I wrote this after reading an article that interviewed Ken Balcom of the Whale Research Center on San Juan Island. And what he had to say about why the whales are disappearing, and that having a lot to do with the matrilines. Silence from the deep. Oh, and it's a pantoum, which is a formal structure. Silence from the deep. How do we mistake desolation for peace? These daughters stolen, these daughters starved. Waves say hush along the beach. Under the waves there is no reprieve. These daughters stolen, these daughters starved. The matron line dwindles as girls go missing. Under the waves there is no reprieve from human noise, pollution, hunger. The matron line dwindles as girls go missing. The world is a mirror of our hearts. Look away from human noise, pollution, hunger. Everything is endangered or going extinct. The world is a mirror of our hearts. Look away so as not to see how under the waves everything is endangered or going extinct. When orcas no longer sing, will we see how under the waves that say hush along the beach. When orcas no longer sing, will we see how we mistook desolation for peace. And these next poems are part of a collection that I'm writing around the idea of solastalgia, which is a word that was invented by an Austrian philosopher to describe a feeling of distress or sadness at a disappearing sense of home or disappearing landscapes. And they have words from Huilnuchken or Chlumichasen, my tribal language, and in the title. So this one is called Remembering Tata at Tamhuiksen, and Tata is the affectionate word for mother, and Tamhuiksen is the place name for Gooseberry Point. A glossary of bell-related words, chimes, sings, peals, tolls. It is a feeling of silver. It rings and shines at the edges. Like the scales of a fish, it flickers, tintinnabulates, the signal of a charm, of magic, of a movie memory sequence. And then there is mother, home from the cannery, covered in the scales of hundreds of gutted fish. She shimmers like a mermaid. Long day, I ask. When I lunch at noon, she replies, the sky is a polished silver spoon. By quitting time, tarnish has overtaken all signs of shine. That's how long the day is. You must have cleaned a lot of fish, I say. I think we cleaned out all of Puget Sound. There used to be gooseberries at Gooseberry Point. Now there is the cannery. Won't be long before all the fish are gone. Then the cannery will go and all we'll have is hunger and sorrow. A burden is the heaviest bell of a carillon. Its register is low. I wish I had a magic wand to chime the cheerful sound of gooseberries sprouting up out of the ground. And that's a true story. Bellingham, Washington was the site of the world's largest cannery at one time. And when the fish were depleted, they moved away and all the jobs went. And several generations of my grandmothers and great-grandmothers have worked in canneries, as Indigenous people were historically excluded from being able to participate in the commercial fishery until 1973. This poem is called Remembering Sila at Schwalisen, and Sila is the word for grandmother, and Schwalisen is the place name for a place that's very special to us. We used to say, when the tide is out, the table is set. The earth provided, and if one day it didn't, the spirit fed us. The glittering turn of the tide, the arc of the sun in the sky, the call of birds, the sound of waves, to be nourished in this way makes glass doors opening and closing themselves between me and that food on grocery store shelves seem false, empty. That food, where does it come from? Whose hands grew it? Was there patience and care? Were there prayers? Think of how it got there, what it's made of. When I was a girl, everything we ate came from the earth that loved us through the hands of the people we loved. So truth telling is always a little bit risky, right? It comes with a certain little bit of risk. And so I'm going to read to you a poem that I wrote in response to an essay that I read by Lee Maracle called Goodbye Snock. And it's about how the Canadian government settled with her people around Granville Island, because that was a harvesting place, a traditional harvesting place for her people. And it was a really powerful essay talking about it being a garden. And actually, the way that I was taught was that our islands, they all served a different purpose. They were like a food source, and we had a migratory route in the summer times where, you know, one island we harvested kama, I believe that was Vendovi, and its traditional place name reflects that. It means to dig. So that's where we harvested camas bulbs, and like Lummi Island was actually called Smamiak, which is the island where we harvested deer. So the whole region was like a garden, and we traveled from place to place and harvested in the summer, and then came home to our winter homes and stayed for the winter. But this is called Suitu Iis Shlatunukin, which means the truly beautiful earth. This used to be a garden before the strangers came with strange beliefs. They claimed to be cursed with something called original sin, but blessed with something else called dominion over the whole living earth. They ravaged the garden, insisted that the savage wilds must be conquered and subdued in order to be improved. We are part of the earth, thus their belief that we too must be subdued. Do you suppose they knew this used to be a garden? On the seventh day, do they look upon their work and see that it is good? I think we need our old beliefs to guide us back to the garden beyond those gates, guarded by that angel with the fiery sword. This used to be a garden. I don't think the strangers knew how the garden grew, so carefully attuned with the rhythms and tones of the earth's own beautiful song sung for untold millennia before they came along. This used to be a garden. It fed us and loved us, and we loved it. We still do, or at least the memory of it. I've heard it said that half histories are half truths and half truths are lies. Let me tell it to you whole. This used to be a garden. And one more before moving on. This one's called Rolling Uphill, and it's brand new. They say somewhere in Washington, there's a road where if you put your car in neutral, you'll defy gravity and roll uphill. The scarcity principle says lack breeds lack, that if you have nothing, you'll be sure to attract nothing. Maybe there are places in the mind where you can park your scarcity thoughts and they'll roll uphill into gratitude and abundance. Just kidding. I didn't mean to suggest that this place was only possible. It definitely exists. Let me draw you a map. First, go past the noise until you reach the silent dancer in the center. Turn with her at each corner until you are the dancer. When the song reverberates in every cell of your body, you've arrived. Park, put it in neutral, and ascend.
Wow, thank you so much. It was great to hear some of those poems I've read many, many times, and to end with that new one is great. And in your in that last poem, you were sort of talking about driving in a car, and I know that you're going to be off driving soon here, and so I'm wondering if you could speak to us for a couple of minutes about what your plans are for the next 2 years. Some of the things that you have, you know, thoughts about for all of us out here, you know, craving more poetry and more inclusivity and yeah, just what your ideas might be.
So one of the things that I would like to do is I would like to see poetry placed in beautiful places, like, you know, where you, if you're ever hiking or visiting the beach or visiting just a really spectacularly beautiful place in our state, there's almost always a little display that has information about the flora and fauna, and then, you know, maybe some local history. But in all of my travels, I've only seen one, and that had like something literary, and it was a quote by the naturalist John Muir, and it was really beautiful, you know, because it kind of puts you in that place in a way that I think, you know, maybe the scientific data or the history doesn't quite put you there and make you appreciate it. And so this is partially inspired by this experience that I had where I was coming across Highway 20 and I saw a sign that said scenic viewpoint. So I pulled off and I went up the switchbacks to the top, and at the very top was this gorgeous view of the North Cascades. And there was a little placard there, and there was a poem, and it was a William Stafford poem. And to just kind of be there in that beautiful place with those words, and it just created this whole experience, and it made me appreciate the place that much more. And so I think poetry has the power to do that. And so that's one of the things that I want to work on, is seeing poetry placed in beautiful places together with information about the flora and the fauna and the history, so that people can have a deeper kind of connection to our state with all of its beauty. And then, you know, maybe want to preserve it. And then also I'm going to be visiting tribes and doing readings and workshops and classroom visits. It's not been part of the Poet Laureate route traditionally, and so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm excited to visit tribal communities in Washington State and celebrate poetry there. And then I'd also like to possibly do a salmon anthology.
Oh my, wow, that
So
would be, yeah. I'm just thinking now too that, you know, I know that all of us at the foundation, as we're listening to your words, we really hope that as you're out there in the tribal lands and listening and helping young poets, that you'll send them along to us, because we sure want to highlight those voices, those youth voices, and get them, you know, on the stage with us. So thank you so much. Thank you. And so now our next portion of the reading is Kip is going to look over a few of the questions in the chat room and ask those questions. And hopefully all four of you, if you are comfortable, can unmute yourselves and start a discussion if you like. So Kip, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, every one of you, for those poems. I'm tremendously moved. The chat room has been primarily, if you've noticed, primarily praise, as is warranted. So I would invite anybody who is interested in asking questions to please go ahead and put those into the chat room now so that we can have this discussion. But I will take care of one piece of housekeeping that came up in the chat, and that's for Rena. Anne wanted to know, what is the name of the essay about Granville Island?
it's called Goodbye Snock.
Goodbye.
And
SN,
Snock,
okay.
Snock is spelled S-N-A-U-Q.
A-U-Q. Thank you very much. I heard you say it, but I didn't know how you spelled it. So I'm seeing a lot of real support for the idea of a salmon anthology, and certainly the idea of poetry of place throughout Washington and involving all people in Washington sounds like just a jewel of an idea. So,
Yeah. So this, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I said, just looking forward to that.
The salmon anthology. So I attended a meeting of the Endangered Species Coalition volunteers, and one of the other speakers, he shared about how it was defined, how it was explained to him what the Salish Sea bioregion is. And whoever said it, I need to find out who this came from. They said that this Salish Sea bioregion is everywhere that a salmon can reach. And historically, that's everywhere in Washington, pretty much where people live. And so I feel like it could be really a very inclusive anthology. And, even looking a little bit at the history of Spokane, for instance, I didn't know that before the dams went in, Spokane was, it had a tourism industry around the salmon fishery.
Oh, wow.
And historically, the Yakima harvested salmon that were prized everywhere, and people, you know, trade routes like grew up around the Yakima salmon, the salmon that went up the river there.
Although I heard on the news that the salmon are disappearing from the Snake River. Do you hear that too? It's really sad.
Yeah. I think it'll open up a lot of discussion maybe around the salmon. We focused a lot on the orcas, which is terribly important, but the salmon are
With the
important
depletion of
too.
the snake, there's a tremendous amount of discussion going on right now about the salmon runs to the snake and all the rivers like you're talking about. That could be a tremendous component. If the state poet laureate's working on this as part of these discussions, it could open up the emotional valve that is necessary, which is really cool. So there's a question about from Paula to all the poets for discussion. What poets do you read? Who are some of your favorite poets? Who do you read? I'm going to ask Gail. Do you have a thought?
I read whatever comes in front of me. But my favorites, I mean, right now, Simon Armitage, Tony Curtis, Kathy Fagan, Ada Limon, who else? And then Welsh poets, of course, Zoe Brigley, Samantha Wynne-Raddick, and then the masters, and you know, I mean, all the romantic poets are always front and center for me. And oh gosh, let me see, Yeats, Frost, all of those.
That's great. So Nikki, I want to hear from you about that because you've had some real comments about some of the poets. Who do you like? Who do you read, and who are your favorites?
Well, for poets right now, I really love Anna Bolshevik's work a great deal, and Ethel Adnan, Brandon Shimoda, Wanda Coleman, she's recently passed. I'm looking around at my I have so much stuff. Sean D. Henry Smith, his book just came out from Future Poem called Wild Peach. I've been a big supporter of their work, excuse me. Marge Piercy, I've been reading a lot of her lately. Yeah.
So the books that are on your desk right now, that are right in front of you, are you reading poetry books on your desk there, or are they other kinds of books that you have stacked up in front of your computer?
Oh, it's a little bit of everything. I have a stack of blues books, blues poetry, because I'm teaching a seminar at the Iowa Writers Workshop in the fall on blues and poetry.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of those is James Baldwin wrote a book of poetry. It's called Jimmy's Blues. So we're going to study that.
That's a pretty rich field.
Mm-hmm. And Hyam Jess's Leadbelly, of course. We're going to study that. Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it kind of changes by the week. I'm trying to read a lot right now. I guess that's been a blessing of the pandemic. I feel like I've just because I've spent money I would have spent on a plane ticket on books. So but I love Denise Levertov, Rita Dove. I have been reading a lot of Amy Nezhukumatatil recently, and Ada Limon, who Gail mentioned. Camille, I always mispronounce her name. Dunji is the new poetry editor for Orion, and I love her book Trophic Cascade, and I love the poem Trophic Cascade. It's just it's a really beautiful poem, and a lot. I mean, I love Seamus Heaney. I always kind of re-fall in love with Seamus Heaney. And Emily Dickinson, I guess, was sort of my gateway into poetry.
Yep, I forgot Elizabeth Bishop.
Elizabeth Bishop, how could you forget?
Oh my gosh, no, she is my god. My god of poetry.
Well, Simon's important to you too, I know. Rena, what are your thoughts?
So lately, I've been reading a lot of Northwest poets, and particularly my friends. It's just really kind of lucky that we come from such a rich poetry tradition in this state. There's so many good poets locally writing currently right now. I did a reading last night with my mentors from who've been with me this whole journey since I switched my major in undergrad from theater to English creative writing. And two of them have new books out. And so I'm looking forward to the new book that has yet to ship. But so that's Jim Bertolino and Anita K. Boyle, some Bellingham poets, and then also Judy Kleinberg, who has written over 2,000 erasures using they're very visually beautiful collage. She's got a great book out. And then poets that I return to often are Frank O'Hara. I just love his he's kind of snarky, but gentle. There's like this feeling that you have that you're observing the world with him. And it's interesting. I can't quite figure out what his music is because it's so subtle, but I'm told he used to play Rachmaninoff, and there is a rhythm in his poetry that it's hard to kind of like get a handle on. I can't figure it out, and I think that's what's so intriguing. But so I'm trying to crack that puzzle still. I also love Gertrude Stein for the sound and the repetition. Yeah, there's poets that I return to just for comfort. And then there's poets that challenge me. Layli Long Soldier, her book Whereas is just so powerful. Oh, and it was mentioned that I got a National Book Award. I actually got an American Book Award. But Layli Long Soldier's book Whereas is a National Book Award winner. Much deserved. Oh my God, it's incredible. But yeah, just kind of whatever comes into my orbit, I read it, and yeah.
Thank you all. I'm going to ask a question that's very specific for Gail to please put into the chat the name of the Welsh poets, because
I just did.
You just did.
Yeah.
Sorry. Great. Wonderful. Good job.
I also put in my favorite flower too.
So one other question before we go to the next round is that Frida asked for all the poets, if not tulips, what's your favorite flower? If it's tulips, you can say so, but if not, we have freesias from Gail.
Violets for me, like the little violets that grow in the grass this time of the year. They're all coming out now, the little purple ones.
I love violets.
Mm-hmm.
Rena.
I like lilies, tiger lilies, the orange ones.
Jessica.
I like dahlias, even the ones that are as big as a dinner plate.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. I'm going to return us to, is it Georgia for the next round? Or Molly?
Okay. All right. Okay, I guess that's me. Let's see. I'll get my screen here. And we're going in reverse order. And so that would be, we're going to start with Rena and we'll do Rena. And then, let's see, I had this written down here. So, sorry, yeah. Rena, Jessica, Gail, and then Nikki will be the order that we go. And we'll just, once you're finished, we'll just go ahead and move right into the next one. I will say welcome to the next poet. That'll be our protocol. All right, so welcome, Rena.
Hello again. So this first poem that I'll read to you is from this book, Sublime Subliminal, which is out on Floating Bridge Press. And it's called Song of the Blue Cricket. Your face is a trapdoor to euphoria. I see you. I want to see more of you. Your face is a bell. I salivate, secrete secret lusts that taste like abiding bliss, a sweet yet refreshing mix of melons and lemons grown by nymphs. Your face is relentless. I can't forget how it feels like the lanate riff of metal from a germanium fuzz bass pedal. I skip across the surface of your glance, then sink into its rippling silence. Eons later, I wash ashore smaller, softer, in waves that break like laughter from the crowded cabarets of Montparnasse. I go there to ask Alice Prynne about the photographs. Was man a chimper when he caught her likeness in his light bucket? Your face relents. I forget how it feels, and so I yield to the urge to yield. Let the devil make a nest in my head. The length of a snake is the snake's secret until it's dead. The blue cricket of transcendence keeps a measuring tape under his bed. He says, darling, dry your tears, and ever hence will live in temples where ample residual resins smolder in unused confessionals. Qu'est-ce que c'est bruit un éclat de rire? Let the soul dangle like a circus aerialist on a thread. A spider on the ceiling, your gaze, is it a safety net or a web? And the French in there was, what is that noise? A burst of laughter. So each of these poems include a famous person and some slang and a phrase you've never heard before. And they're just kind of fun. They were fun to write, so I'm hoping they are fun to read as well. This one is called Indistinct Features. Your face is a movie screen. There are 2 matinees and 3 features every day. Your smile incites the theremin to which I react with acumen. You were one thing, now another. Tasted like sugar, now like butter. Mr. Tom Savini, Sultan of Splatter, Godfather of Gore, the orchestra can see you around that corner, behind that door, cooking up some violence. The violins are going crazy, and I will react with the antonym of acumen when you come to slay me. But the angels will sing a chromatic hymn when your demons come for you, to do you like Mercutio, find you a grave man tomorrow. YOLO, the kids will say, there's something about an open grave that makes me amorous, libidinous, downright horn dog AF. Gotta replace a life with a life, gotta get in the pudding club. I'll give you the sweet pearl of my sympathy swathed in the nacre of my spiritual oyster mounted in a shining ring. Poke a hole in the curtain between the living and the dead. Now it's a peep show for your soul. If you peek, you'll see the day where we all go back to analog. Colloids and emulsions on reels instead of coitus and emotions in files. Tomaten often augen haben. Images flicker 24 times per second across your face. I can't keep hold of your features. There's a feather where your mouth is supposed to be. It flutters when you say, oh, come on, baby, don't look at me that way. The foreign language phrase there is tomatoes on the eyes, which means you're not seeing things clearly when it's a German phrase. And sorry, I was thinking that was a different poem. You know how you haven't read in a long time, a poem in a long time, and then you go back to it and you're like, huh, I thought that was something else. So there you have it. This one I'll share. It's part of the Jack Straw Writers anthology. This was such a beautiful experience to be a part of the Jack Straw Writers cohort in 2019. I was selected to be a part of that group by Kathleen Flanagan. And she's just wonderful and amazing. And I love her work as a poet, but as a person, she's just really super great. So this poem is an invented form that I call oblique sonnet. And what I did was I wrote 4 8-line stanzas, and then I wrote a 5th stanza of 6 lines, so that it can go at the end of any of the 8-line stanzas and still work as a poem. It's called Shimmy at the Volta. Is it comforting to be told that we are not alone? Do you assume whatever is with us loves us? Perhaps the being who is busy conjuring clouds is watching over us now. 2. Does it unsettle you to be told that we are not alone? Are you made leery by a lack of backstory? Who's out there? Perhaps intelligent aliens with bony eyelids and starlit iridescent eyes stare. 3. Of course we are not alone. We have our own strange reflections like wings of glass fluttering in a maze of mirrors, perhaps evolved to crack so we can make breakthroughs. 4. We are alone if you believe the universe is one big thing, which it is, in the same way an octopus has one big brain and another in each leg. Perhaps we are alone. Shall we move joyfully and see if anyone joins to have a shimmy? At the Volta, have a shimmy and another in each leg. Make breakthroughs. In a maze of mirrors, eyes stare. Who's in there watching us? Does it love us? And I actually think that I'll end with a poem from my oldest collection, Patriarchy Blues. This one is called Lament for the Love of Bunny. And this poem is the first that was written in the form that was used to write Sublime Subliminal, but there were many years between this one and the others. Lament for the love of Bunny. She can eat a man whole with her eyes, lick his skinny bones white, sweat him from her pores in the fever of a cold, cold night. Would have the smell of stargazer lilies wilting, and the whole thing would sound like a soft sigh. When first I saw her, she had big hair and a blackened eye. She said, I could make loving you my business. That would be a good first line. But she's closed up shop, and there will be no more sighing like that on our block. She took the red light down, left us to remember the washed out stars above her lonely stoop and a Panatella's hot display. These days we smoke and the time just goes, while our sons of these concrete gardens grow gray, but hard, blossom into stone. Did I ever tell you how once, after lovemaking, Bunny saw a roach the size of a meadowlark crawling into the sunlight to die? She would see an ugly thing and sing, I want to be a part of it, New York, New York, but she's gone. Took the girls uptown, bought them all a home, learned to sew. And at least I don't love her no more. So how could we be low beneath these bright lights, though Bunny took the red one down? That was a New York poem. We're so lucky to live in such a beautiful place. I'm just saying. I think it's a little
Rena,
different.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear your voice and read those lovely poems. So we'll go ahead and move on, unless you have another one you want to read for us, and maybe we'll save that for the encore. Great. All right. So next up will be Jessica. Thank you. Welcome, Jessica, back.
Thanks, Molly. And thank you all for being here today and listening, and just for sharing your poems. I'm really, really honored to be here. And I might read a couple old poems, but I wanted to read this one from Feeding Hour. It's called Two Mothers Walking, and it's for Anna, who I think is here today too. We thought they were swans, far offshore in a huddle, lazy swans that chose to stay. But the long arc of orange gave them away. Stragglers, climate change refugees that in a normal year would never reach our northern cove of coastline. But what is normal anymore? We were talking about life and babies. My daughter about to walk, your daughter graduating. You want to clutch and hold her close, while mine refuses to be put down. They grow up so fast, you say. I need more time to myself, I say. Driven to near extinction by pollution, these pelicans are a miracle or an omen. We stride slowly like the unfurling tide, acknowledging these visitors and the fierce uncertainty of what may come next. And I do love the swans. I'm so sad when they leave the valley and go back north, but it's very strange to see pelicans in this part of the world. This is a poem about my neighbor. It's called Fences. My neighbor has an impeccable lawn, fit for golf or polo. In the evening, she traverses the perimeter, picking up any imperfections. Dried leaves, dandelions, or embarrassing chickweed. Our side of the fence is pasture, lazy with long grasses, clover, occasional thistles. While grazing, the sheep study her. She works linearly, past them on hands and knees, conquering the last moments of daylight. This farmland, once tide land, can support many things. Potatoes, wheat, migrating waterfowl, the messiness of new life pouring out of a ewe at sunset. I close the barn door so as not to disturb her with the smell of it all. And I want to read, this is actually a poem I wrote called Motherhood that I wrote before I was a mother. And it was just included in this new anthology that James Cruz has put together called How to Love the World. And I'm really grateful to be in here. There's a lot of beautiful poems. And I think he was on the ticket for the 2020 festival and hopefully will be joining us in 2022. Motherhood. When the lilacs come back, I remember that I was born, that there was a robin's nest outside my mother's window as she waited to count my toes. Now her hands rest on her stomach, tangled in contemplation, as if I am still in there. Her fingers are woven together like a fisherman's net as she tries one more time to offer advice. I'll just end with my poem Flood Patterns from Flood Patterns, which I haven't read in a while, but I was thinking about it the other day. Flood Patterns, Skagit Delta. Nobody wants to lose land. God plays with the light until the sky becomes empty and dark. A storm trembles in the mountain, echoing thunder. This river can run high as glaciers thread down to thick streams. When the land was half marsh, the fields knew only flood. Our truths are ready to spill over the rim every time the river rises again. Thank you.
Beautiful, Jessica. Thank you so much for reading Two Women Walking. I love that poem, and Motherhood from James's edited collection is really lovely to hear you read that. And Fences, that's actually one of my favorite poems from that book. Thank you for reading those. Thanks. All right. So next up is Gail. Gail, let's hear some more truths from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Molly. And thank you for everybody for you listening and for staying with us. One of the most important places for me to visit on my sabbatical was my grandparents' grave in Rye Cemetery up Rye Hill. And it has a bit of a story behind it because when they died, they died within a few months of each other, and my mother and my uncle weren't talking to each other. And so neither of them would buy a gravestone. They wanted the other one to buy the gravestone, but they wouldn't because he should have bought the gravestone. So hence, my grandparents have no gravestone. And when I went back the first time to England, I was determined to get gravestone for them so that at least the progeny would know where to find them. But I couldn't find the grave. Nobody could find the grave. And the records had been in a fire and all burned. So there was no knowledge of the graves. And even the town told me, the person at the town said, well, you can put them on the side of the cemetery, a gravestone, but that was stupid. Anyway, when I was working with Samantha, I was determined to finish this poem to honor my grandparents. They may not have a gravestone, but they have a poem. So it's a visit to Granny's and Granddad's grave on Rye Hill. High on Rye Hill, shielded from the lashings of the English Channel's blasting gales, lie my granny and granddad, long dead. An ancient cypress guards them in the growth of this sullen place, and the earth smells of violets. The gardener's cottage is open with the stove and bookshelves empty in expectation. Last time, a woman and her dogs had it filled with belongings, and a fire welcomed us. I needed her help to find the graves, for although my granddad was a favored minister and my granny a respected lady, they were left unmarked, hard for their granddaughter to find. Their two children, after years of not talking to each other, wouldn't buy a stone. Finally, the proper numbered cross was found. The other was 100 feet off, broken. I placed them together so that next time I'd know exactly where to look, but next time they'd been moved by the wind of 87, no longer reclaimable. Their place lost in this graveyard where they lay, the sounds of Sussex sheep bleating rose from the fields below, wind whined through the heavy oak door of the empty church. The sea a mile away sent its salted herring smell to my nose, and gray clouds hovered, threatening rain. I knew how peaceful it must be for them, and easy, gone from the worries that I felt. No more movement nor travels. 20 years ago, I would have been scolded by my small, bent, white-haired granny for standing getting cold. And if I lied about it, then hellfire would burn me to a crisp. My granddad, always patient, would tell her to be still and stop worrying. A tall, saintly man who walked too far and refused to wear a coat after Granny died. If I'd been there 70 years before, I could have seen her with masses of curly brown hair, impatiently waiting with her parasol in the summer sun for my granddad to greet his parishioners. Dinner would be waiting on the table when they returned home, and the afternoon would be spent listening to music on the radio in the sitting room. The smile they would give to each other, rooted deep, to last for years. The next poem is actually taken from a true story that a friend of mine in London told me. I know you won't believe it was a true story, but it really was a true story. And I wrote it during my flight coming home, and so it's the last poem in the book. It's called A Vegan's Dinner. It is not as though we hadn't been forewarned about his desolatory desires, but finding mango for dinner was not one of them. Having taken our coats, he invited us to his kitchen table where a spread of mango slices was laid out in perfect symmetry, laid in a circle like a flower, the orange petals oozing juice and smelling sweet. Lovely. And what else is there for dinner? I asked, expecting the main course to follow. Mango, he replied, just mango. There was an Indian takeaway around the corner, so I offered to order something more substantial, but he seemed insulted, stating that mangoes had all the necessary nutrients. They were in essence a superfood. We gave ourselves over to our mango feast. The spiced tea that followed was dessert, and when it was at an end, we stepped out into the rainy streets of Richmond and made our way home. Unbelievable. Okay, so some new poems. And yeah, so after my eldest son killed himself, I was unable to write about it for years. But while I was on sabbatical, I wrote 3 poems, and this is one of them. It's called Porter's Lake. You called just to tell me the man across Porter's Lake took his 2-year-old son's life by jumping into the icy water, cracking the surface, both gone. And afterwards, the boy's mother stood at the edge and cried and screamed for days. You couldn't bear it, so you had to tell me. When you took your own life, I know you knew the pain I would feel. After weeks of screaming for my son to come back, I knew that mother's pain. I knew the rawness of that wound. I knew it could never bring you back. My hair I cut off could have been hers. A poem about my mother and all the mothers as they age, called Pearls. When I washed my mother's back, her skin would shine like a perfect pearl, translucent, like the inside of an oyster shell. If I got water in her hair, she'd scream, cutting the smooth surface with fear. We would sleep away the hours wasted in moments of time we couldn't bring back. Mother dear, you were always the wise one. You did know what was best, and one day I will know too. All of us have known love, and one day will know grief. To hear your mother's voice crying out to you, and to touch her tenderly again, so tears will rest on your cheeks like perfectly formed pearls. Yes, when we emigrated to America, my mother worked all day, and then she'd come home at night and teach piano lessons into the late night. And I used to have to be in the back, cook dinner, and do my homework and stay out of it. But those piano lessons really affected my development. It's called piano lessons. They lasted until 10 at night, the continual counting and striking of wrong notes. My life at home was a musical parade of students. My mother taught while I was in the back of the house doing homework and preparing dinner, so she wouldn't have to leave her chair by the piano. No, no, play it again. I would cringe to hear, wanting the right note to be struck. Twilight ended and the lamp would be turned on to cast a honey glow over the keys. When the student left, there was a brief silence until the next student came. I fantasized that the silence would go on forever, and my mother, after a long day at work, could rest. But Brahms interrupted, and the music lulled me to sleep. I realized after I got older that she worked so hard. At the time, I just would get angry with the sounds. But anyway, we learn. This last poem is, my mother lived through the Blitz in London during the war. They were bombed night after night after night. And she refused to go down into the underground because she was more scared of being gassed than she was being bombed. And they were all given a small square leaded table, kitchen table, which she would hide under. And of course, my father, being the good Welshman that he was, just went up the hill to the pub. So my parents moved out of their flat or apartment, and the next day they went back to get stuff, and it had been bombed and it was rubble. So that was probably the closest call they got. I grew up, I was born in the next decade after the end of World War II. And I still remember the rubble in the streets, the rationing that went on for a long time. And it took London decades to rebuild. So, and I'm not sure what is real and what are stories in my memory. So this is called Inherited Memory. The stories my family told of the war made it seem I was fighting at the front, hiding under the lead kitchen table, navigating the rubble of our bombed out flat. Or was it the inherited memory they gave me? The bombs showering down on London were real to me. When the planes went back across the channel, they had fun shooting at the school children fleeing for home, trying to hide in the ditches at the side of the Sussex lanes. Nothing was ever reported of that, but my family knew, and I grew up fearing the ditches, looking up in the sky, over my shoulder, around each corner, listening, waiting. Inherited memory, It is inside of me. It is everywhere, everywhere. Thank you.
Holy cow. Holy cow, Gail. Oh my God. Tears and gut wrenching. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those powerful poems with us.
Thank you,
Thank
Molly.
you. Thank you. All right. So Nikki, you're up next. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm reading from my book, from Copper Canyon. This is me on the cover, age 4, in my Easter finery. This book is written for my grandmother, who died about 4 years ago now. So this book is dedicated to her. It was a complicated relationship. I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, who are white, and my father is from Chicago and he's African American. He abandoned us when I was a baby, so you know, I was the only Black child in a family in northern Wisconsin. So it was a very complicated morning, but she was a stable presence in my life. Even though, I mean, she tried her best, but there was definitely a lot of things that she didn't understand, or my family didn't understand. So a lot of this book is about that. Okay, I'll read a poem about being a tired mother, because I am a mother too. I have a 15-year-old and a 6-year-old. This body keeps the keys. My dear sparkly-eyed polyps, I don't have enough juice to be the sole joist of this family today. So I dream of clawfoot tubs where I splash, unapologetic, and how deep this umbilical gets, slumped from getting over, hair unwashed, toenails randy as hell, because I am sincerely mothered the fuck out. So tired, this mothering body. Shell-like lying face down on a coastline, ashing and mottled, pockmarked, canker sorrel, no good pictures of myself. Skin bag, workhorse, baby creamery, constant upkeep of management, cultivation of self-care, cosmetic, Black pride goddess. God damn, this shit gets tiresome, putting so much effort into what doesn't last. Sometimes I want to retire, shave my head, be a nun or a monk, just so I can forget all the years and bludgeon, so I could look like somebody else swimming around in their own pallid wheel of tears. Yamaya, what is to become of us? I drag my body around lovingly, but it still won't let me go. Black woman on a plane, 21st century. Minutia in a bowl, jury-rigged hand in need of a drink. The flight attendant said, "It's on me. I must have looked like I needed one." Such a rough climb, wobbly as the sun during Leo season. Come to find out, a brand new plane is hot to handle. The first breath, crucial, coughs. My favorite path of looking winds up when I'm in the air. There's no way to vacuum seal death up here, I suppose, even though I've never felt the urge to buy a traveling pillow. If something develops, if our machine defects, I'll ask if I can hold the hand of the woman who gave me a drink. Then it's time to land like nothing happened. The captain standing at the door with his crew. He's younger than I am, a baby-faced white boy. We don't know his name or where he came from. Women are doomed to be the angels of love. This is so true. I involuntarily doodle hearts everywhere I go. I sign my letters compulsively with hearts. Dream of disobedient hearts. Work with hearts. I eat them. I boil sauces and the tomatoes on my cutting board form a daisy chain heart. My feet are bound in red ballet slippers, Lisa Frank style, engorged with crusty satin hearts. I pronounce my name with an embarrassingly hearty accent. My colostrum pools with the thumping of an inflamed heart, inspired by the nutritional needs of my babies. Hearts are spray painted on trains like talismans, guiding me eventually to the heart afterlife, where my treasured friends exist in heart time, drinking wine and organizing a workers collective named Heavenly Valley Emotional Workers in the mossy hidden heart clouds, where my restless heart tires of hearing famous singers singing sweetly about unsatisfying love in the grocery store, when their hearts could be screaming about environmental devastation and global capitalism. The way this callous dorm pillow I saw online plastered with hearts and dream catchers says only good vibes is in no way related to what the hearts of this country really need. On good days, I submit to being a committed student of the heart. On bad days, I am paranoid and anxious about my heart being kidnapped by intruders in blue uniforms. And how is seen in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where the sacrificial victim's heart gets ripped out, in one of Hollywood's stereotypical cinematic presentations of indigenous culture, sent me a message about men who are so powerful they could take what they wanted from my body with their bare hands. Where do bad folks go when they die? Asked Kurt Cobain on my favorite Nirvana album. I replace folks with hearts and marvel at the candor of strange, smarmy men on TV who want to be president, who have no idea being part of a community is different from purchasing investments in a city. My heart is stone sore. My heart wants to close forever to protect me from market combat. But as a woman bred for strength and openness, I lack options. I'm pretty good at the precarious art of choosing what gets in. Since doom makes a great gatekeeper, it's rainwater in a vase of roses on a sleeping hero's grave. When the devil leads us home and yells surprise. Is that your house? He asked. This used to be my house, I said. But those are not your people, so that can't be your house. But it is my house, I said. I had some people, maybe a few, even though those are not your people, even though they don't look like you. I had to live somewhere, I said. This is the house where I lived. But where are your people, he said. My people live in a different house. They don't care to know about me. If you're the devil, why are you asking me questions? The devil said, since the house you had to live in is gone, I thought you'd be happy. Sure is a hot day, I said. Of course it is, said the devil. Why do you think I work in town? Way of the road. I closed my eyes so I didn't have to look at it anymore. When I opened my eyes again, it was still there. The same raggedy recollections, but I was farther down the road than the last time I was willing to rest. The road is an exasperating concept. I'd get sent to jail if I drove the car off into a field of ragweed and chicory. But in my mind, something resembling freedom would spark until the highway patrol came to take me away. We're tagged at birth with no excuses. Just follow it and swallow the signs. Once when I was a child, I was eating with my grandmother at a throwback hamburger joint, when out of the blue, someone drove a car into the side of the building. Turned out it was an old white man who had his foot on the gas pedal instead of the brake. A cop arrived as we left, certain the mystical fidelity of insurance would fix everything, the white man having been born with an excuse. Today is not an exceptional day. Almost every car we've passed is either a truck or an SUV. I feel ugly looking at them. When crossing the street, one is advised to look both ways before moving. This is a lesson we're required to learn in elementary school. Another one is never to accept rides from strangers. Serial killers wait in the wings of on-ramps, sucking down packs of energy drinks while listening to AM radio. It's rare I can remember names of officers. Blueberries, cherries, fruits for the damned. You need to finish up your blunts and crash the weed immediately when you see one around you. On the other side of the highway, bags are unpacked, and German Shepherd dogs bark and mildew over my overstuffed bladder buried underneath the rest stop. The past looks to the future with a portly film over its eye. A sack of goldfish breaks in the center line, and when you get too close, it's gone. Recollections of dash memories, or reflections from a new mirage. Either way, the sirens are enlisted to stare when we don't belong. So I close my eyes again, and when I reopen them, we've arrived at our destination. It's the grocery store parking lot, and they're having a sale on end of season vegetable starters. Why do I feel so old when I look so young? Why do I feel so old when I look so young? Have a night of okay fun, and I feel better and younger, refreshed, maybe lovelier. But in the morning, I feel just as old again. Hey friend, how are you? I see you're young too, around the same age as me. Look at those folks with their big boy pens and crooked chairs. They act younger than we do, and our lives are somewhere else in faces even older than these. When I was younger, people thought I was older, so they did older things to me, said things too. Probably why I'm feeling old while I'm still looking young, because of what older people did when I was little, should have known better not to do. Say, friend, I hear you too. Things happen to you. That's the way evil goes. Lets people do bad things. Don't know why that is, but the how is inside the what, tying the ends of the who. Maybe we can stop it from going to the next someone. Yes, it's like that. The could've, the should've, and the would've. If I would have known then what I know now, maybe I could have got out of the way. But I was too young, and now I'm older. Outside the what and the who, but still inside the how and the why. Let me introduce my old ass self. How do you do? My name is Young, plus the last time I loved without fear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was lovely. Kip, do we have maybe one question in the chat room that we can open up to the poets, and then we'll I think we'll just close out the session. We're getting pretty close to our 5 p.m. and we've lost a few people, but not too many. People are hanging in there. It's great. So
I'm going to take the liberty, actually, I don't have a question in the chat room, again, other than comments that are running comments about how much this is appreciated. But I'm going to take the liberty to ask a question. Partly I'm going to ask Nikki first, but I'm asking of everybody. It's a basic question, but I am very much filled with wanting to know the answer. How did you start writing poetry? It's quite a background you shared a few components of. What brought you to it? How did you begin? I'll ask Nikki first.
Okay. My mom always read, so reading was very normal in our house. I remember I used to play on my mom's word processor and I didn't know how to write, but I fancied myself as a writer. So I would sit and like copy books when I was real little. And then in 2nd grade, I started writing stories. But then by the time I was a teenager and boys entered the picture, it became poetry. So about, since I was about 14 or so, I wrote poetry. I'm 38 now. This is my 3rd book. And
That's tremendous.
yeah.
Tremendous. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot you process around that age. It's always interesting when poetry is what you turn to at that point, or how you hear that.
Yeah, especially when you're, a quiet kid that doesn't feel like they fit in anywhere. And, books are the place to go. They always will welcome you. And then in turn, they teach you that you can do the same for yourself and for others.
Thanks. Gail, how about you? You're still muted.
Same question?
Same question, yeah.
Well, growing up in Rye, if anybody's been there, it's a writers and artists community. And so I always thought I'd be a writer. I thought that was a natural evolution. Plus my mother always had me read poetry and memorize poetry. I still remember them. But I always wanted to be a novelist. I always wanted to write long works. But every time I came to write, and this was in my teen years, they'd always turn out to be poetry. And so I gave up. I just write it poetry. I don't have enough words for a big work.
Well, I'm glad you gave up your novel because I really love your poem.
I guess you just have to be succinct, and that's all I have. Those are the only words I have to show you the emotion I feel.
Rena, how did you start writing poetry? Or at what age and for what reasons?
So I wrote my first poem when I was 7, and it was, I was home with a fever and my grandma picked up my schoolwork from school, and the assignment was to write springtime words on this little paper cloud, and it had like the pretty colored tissue paper coming down it like rainbow rain. And I thought it was like so beautiful. I was like, that needs a poem. And so I thought I'm gonna try it, but I always loved rhymes. I actually remember my mom reading to me when I was really little, and my favorite was Dr. Seuss, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, because it's like that, the sounds, like I just loved it. And then it's just always been something I really loved. I remember when I was in 7th grade, I memorized Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. It's a long poem, but I had it, and everybody had to sit there and listen to me recite the whole thing. So, it's always kind of been something I've enjoyed, but I don't think I ever really started to write it in earnest until I got into undergrad and found Poetry 351, Intro to Poetry, and then it was just like, oh, these are my people. I found my place, and that's kind of how it felt when I got there instantly. So,
well, I love this. I love the strong music in your poetry. So the idea that it began early, that you felt, the movement of the words that early, that's not a surprise that you carried that forward. But thank you so much. Poetry is beautiful. Jessica.
Yeah, I wrote poems a lot when I was younger. I did love the rhyming poems. That was, I would always send people cards with rhyming poems on it. And I
Aw,
loved Emily Dickinson, but I went into the sciences for a long time, and so it wasn't until my early 30s that I started writing poems again. And really the festival coming to I was working as a scientist in Mount Vernon, Washington, and coming to the festival and realizing how much I miss poetry kind of reignited the writing practice for me. I remember I went to a session with Elizabeth Austin and Marie Howe, and I was just weeping at the end of it, and just it really made me want to write again. So it's been kind of a revisiting, I guess, in my life.
when did you encounter Emily Dickinson? Because you said that she's sort of
High
the,
school, high school English classes, and I loved how she wrote about nature. I loved her sort of mode of inquiry. I tried to mimic her poems quite a bit, but it's kind of hard to do. So I don't try that anymore, but I do appreciate her.
oh, thank you so much. I've so appreciated everybody sharing. I've appreciated the breadth and the depth of what the four of you have brought to today's event. I'm very, very impressed, moved, edge of tears, thankful. So appreciate it. Take it away, Molly.
Okay, thank you, Kip. All right, and I think that we'll go ahead and just close out today's really wonderful session. And just in closing, I'd like to say this. Robert Carroll, who was a doctor at the medical center at the University of California in Los Angeles, said that poetry can give people a way to talk about subjects like death and dying and provide healing to help us process difficult things. So to Nikki and Rena and Gail and Jessica, thank you for your time today and your truth and your beauty. And I also want to thank all of our generous donors who make this and our Poets in the Schools program possible. And without them and without our audience, you guys, we couldn't do this. So thank you, and thank you, and thank you for joining us. This was really a remarkable 2 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Molly and Georgia, for putting it all together.
Oh,
Thank you guys so
Great
much.
job.
Yes, thank you, Haishka.
So I'm sorry, I had videos, but they didn't work out, but maybe another time. So, all right, be well, stay well, and enjoy the rain that we're gonna have here. So, excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to meet
Bye-bye.
all of you.
Bye-bye, Nikki. It was great.
Hopefully someday in person.
Yes, please.
We can't wait until this pandemic is done.
Oh, I know.
Nikki, you have to come meet your Copper Canyon family out here on the West Coast. So
I'm planning on it. When it's safe enough, I will be out there.
okay.
You got it. You've got an open invitation, Nikki, anytime. So
Great.
you got my
Well,
email.
Okay.
You even have
No,
my
but-
phone number, I think. All right. Goodbye,
All
everybody.
right. Y'all have a great night. Bye.
Bye. Let's see.